rock. Not much to look at. Not pretty. Not really a whole lot of things you can do with it. But yet for years, Chevy has had a slogan for their trucks. Like a rock. Why is that? Take this little thing right here. How hard is it to break it? How much weight can you put on this? Throw this through that glass. This is still going to stay the same shape it's in. The glass will shatter, but this is still going to stay in the same shape it's in. There's a certain essence about a rock, even though it's just a rock. They come in all kinds of size and shapes. Rock can be big, can be little. It can be dark in color like this one. It can be light in color. It can have many names. Some people call it gravel, whatever. Gravel, pebbles, stones. But it's a rock. Take this little rock right here, and any of our vehicles out here, and set it in front of it, drive over it, it's not going to break it. It won't break it. A rock has an unimaginable amount of strength. It has an unimaginable amount of ability to do things, even though it just sits here. Just sits there. But when you pick it up, what can you do with it? What all can be done with this rock when you pick it up? Like I said, it's a rock. It doesn't matter how big or how small it is, it does not change. 20 years from now, that rock will still look the same. It'll still look just like this. You can almost look at a rock and say it's dependable. It's always going to be there. No matter what, it's always going to be there. You never have to worry about it going anywhere. A strong wind won't blow it away. Matter of fact, the bigger rocks and even creek beds, you got water flowing over them all the time, but they never move. So wind and water can't move them. They can, but a big enough rock, it's not going to touch them. You even look at a diamond. It's considered to be the most precious stone there is, yet it's still a rock. I mean, you look at all the people have got engaged with rings and things and just have got engaged, and many times you'll see them and they'll be flashing that you can see that diamond from across the room. And it's inevitable you're going to hear somebody say, "Wow, look at that rock." Because it's so beautiful. And it shines. It just has this essence about it that it just draws you to it. But yet when it breaks right down to it, it's just a rock. Second Samuel 22 verses 1 through 3. David sang to the Lord the words of this psalm when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation." Why does David refer to God as his rock? The man after God's own heart refers to God not just in these verses, but 17 times. 17 times in David's lifetime, just it's recorded, he calls God his rock. My rock. I read this scripture earlier this week, and I just got thinking about that. My rock. My rock. And I got looking. Just as I said, they're hard. They don't change. In any way, shape, form, or fashion, they don't change. They come in small sizes. They come in big sizes. What about God? God is big enough to be over this whole world, to watch over each and every one of us at every single point in time. Yet He can be small enough just to be there, just to have that personal relationship with just us. Just me and Him, or you and Him. But more importantly, we're talking about David here, that he is considered one of the greatest figures in the Bible. So much to the point that even Jesus came through his life. David was the second king, but considered the greatest king. David took this little rock and took down a giant. But that rock that he took the giant down with, was it actually really a rock like that? Or was it his rock? God. See, we have so many things today that we want to put an essence on in life. We want to put this major focus on these certain things in life. We want to put it on, what's the house going to look like, or how are we going to decorate it, or do we have everything clean enough? Or do we have enough money to do this or to do that? It's kind of a crazy statement, but in all honesty, do we really look at God as our rock today? Do we really look at Him as our rock? As the one that we can stand upon and say, I know everything's going to be okay. I know everything's going to be okay. No matter how bad times get, no matter how much I'm struggling, I know that I've got my rock to stand on. Jesus even tells us over in the New Testament to build on a rock, not on the sand, to build on a solid foundation so you don't sink. What is our foundation this morning? Is our foundation in something other than this church? Than the church itself? Is our foundation in going through the rituals of church? Is our foundation in being religious? Or is our foundation in our rock, in Jesus Christ? I know I'm getting into a really hazy area here, into an area that still today isn't the most popular. But to reach out to the world, to get into the things we need to get into, we don't always need to worry about what's necessarily proper, as in we need to worry about what our rock, the one that we need to put everything we've got into, says to do. Kirk Cameron, an 80s superstar, huge, an atheist for the most of his growing up, is now one of what I would say one of the greatest Christians in America today. Not because he's got a big name and he was on TV, but because of what he does. He goes out to the gang members of LA. Goes out to the people that most of them would rather shoot you than look at you. I'm serious. They would either rather shoot you, stab you, and probably every one of them have got a gun or a knife on them. But he walks right up in amongst them and says, "Let me tell you about Jesus today." But more than that, he goes even a step further. He asks them these series of questions. It's based on the 10 Commandments. And when he gets done, he basically tells them, so basically what you're saying, these people that have got guns, knives on them, killed people, robbed, everything else. He basically tells them, so you're telling me you're a liar, a thief, a murderer, an adulteress. Basically everything the 10 Commandments tells them not to do. He looks them straight in their face and tells them they are that. And walks away from it. Many times saving many of their lives. Why does he do that? Not because he's religious, not because he goes through the motions of going to church, not because he does it the way that it needs to be done. No, the reason why is because he stands on that foundation of God. He does it because that's what he's called to do. That is what he's called to do. In my prayer earlier, I was talking about us, this nation, this world, us as a Christian nation. I'm not talking about America here. I'm talking about the world. I'm talking about people following Christ. when we follow Christ, it's not about just coming to church. It's not about just singing. It's not about just listening to the sermon. It's not about sitting in the pew. It's not about raising your hands. It's about doing it. It's about saying, God, you're my rock. If you want me to raise my hands, shout and praise you and everything else, I do it. If you want me to be silent, I'll do it. If you want, whatever you want me to do, you just tell me to do it, because I know you're my rock. I know that no matter what, you're going to take care of me. And I just want to do what you want me to do. You look at David. 17 times. Again, 17 times in 15 different verses. He called God his rock. You know, David only messed up really one time. That's another story for another day. But he even repented for that. This is at the end of his reign. These 3 verses I just read are at the end of his reign as king. He's coming up on his elderly. He doesn't have much left in him. He's already went through the battles. He's already fought Goliath. He's already had to deal with Saul, where Saul tried to kill him over and over and over again. He finally became king. And yet still people were after him constantly. Throughout David's life, as I've been reading about it a lot lately, he was constantly being sought after by people to try to kill him. But that didn't stop him. He kept going. And he kept praising God. David sang to the Lord the words of this song, and the Lord delivered him from the hands of all his enemies and the hands of Saul. He said, the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge. David didn't worry about being proper. In everything David did, he sought the Lord's advice. He sought it in every single matter of his life. Except one time. And that one time he messed up. But God forgave him. David was a king. He was the highest authority of the land. You had problems, you had to go to David. Everything went through David. He was a man of stature that can't even be imagined today. But yet he never once stepped off his rock. Instead, he kept planting firmer and firmer and firmer on his rock. He had people all the time, like I said, going after him. Even after his position. Before he even died, one of his sons tried to take over as king before he'd even passed away. But because David stood on his rock, stood firm on his rock, stood firm on what God had given him, he made it through. And the kingship went to who it was supposed to Solomon. Are we like David this morning? Or are we like Saul? David was after God's heart. Saul wasn't. Saul acted like he was. But Saul messed up so many times that it even got to the point that God started hardening Saul's heart. It's many of the reasons why he went after David so many times. Saul started out as a man of God. But yet he started getting jealous. He started getting envious. Because his successor had already been named before his kingship was over. Long before that. Saul stepped off his rock, which in turn ended up leading to his death. David never stepped off his rock. You can look at Samson. Samson's rock was his hair, because his hair was his strength through God. Samson never gave up on God. He did one thing God told him not to do, and to reveal his secret of his strength. His hair got cut. Because of that, they ended up blinding him. But what did Samson do at the end? What did Samson do? He took one more last stand. As his hair started growing back out, he took one more last stand. He stood up on his rock. He stood up for God and said, just give me the strength one more time. Just give it to me one more time, God, so that I can do what is right by you. And what did he do? He knocked out a column and took down a whole building. All because he stood on his rock. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, during the time of Jesus, they persecuted him, killed him. He raised. Thank him for doing that. But there's a little bit deeper part to that. See, many times we get so engulfed. We get so engulfed in being a Christian that we forget to be a Christian. Many times we get so engulfed in trying to do everything exactly like it needs to be done. The way that it's got to be done, it's just got to be done this way. It can't be done any other way. It just has to be done this way. Because that's the only way it'll please God. No, it's not. As long as you do what God does. It's not us doing it to please God, but we're doing what God tells us so that we can please God. When we get to the point that we focus so hard on having every I dotted, every T crossed, the ink completely dry, are we so focused on that sometimes that we leave God out of the picture? But yet our main purpose in doing it all is for God. It can happen. It happened to the Pharisees. They got so caught up in the religion of it, in the rituals of it, in doing the things that had to be done a certain way. They got so caught up in it that they had Jesus right in front of their face. And when Jesus said that He was God, that He was the King of the Jews, they ripped their clothes because they said that He was being blasphemy to God. But all He was doing was telling them who He really was. They stepped off their rock. When we stand on our rock, sometimes we do things that we don't think make any sense. When we stand on our rock, sometimes we can do things that might every once in a while cause an uproar. But we got to remember, when we're standing on that rock, if we're causing an uproar, as long as we're standing on our rock and doing it, and it is by God's will that we are doing it, then it's fine. But sometimes we want to step off that rock of God and we want to step on the rock of ourselves and say, well, I want to do it this way. Or I think it needs to be done this way. You got to know the difference between the two. I had no intention to go this direction with this morning. But that's where I went. Because when it boils right down to it, this right here, this one little rock right here can mean the same as this. These can mean the same. Because when God is our rock, then we start carrying the cross. We start carrying it. But with our rock, God will help us carry it. Because He is our rock. Because He is our fortress. Because He is our Savior. Because He is the one that no matter what's going on, we can depend on. None of us are perfect. We strive for it, but we all mess up. We let other people down. As much as we try not to let anyone down, every once in a while we do it. It's the truth. I don't like to let anybody down. I probably do it on a daily basis. But I try my best not to. Because I want to do everything I can for every person. And I used to hear people say, I still hear it sometimes, you're just one person, you can't do it all. You're just one person, don't try to accomplish all of it. You're just one person. No, I'm not just one person. And neither is anyone else who is a Christian, who's a true follower of God. Because if you truly follow Jesus, truly follow God, and truly do the works that He asks you to do, you're not just one person, but you are one person through Jesus Christ, which through that allows you to do many more things. You can do so much. So many things. Paul was just one person. But because he stood on his rock, stood firm, he ended up becoming a martyr for Christ. He still wrote 13 books of the New Testament, and because of Paul, how many people became Christians? How many people started following Jesus because of Paul standing firm? But yet when it comes right down to it, Paul said he is the least of the apostles. The least of them. And before Paul's conversion, he was a murderer. He was one of the first Pharisees groups to go out and kill Christians. And then he turns around and becomes a follower of Christ. This morning, what I'm asking you, so we have an invitation with Him. I'm just asking you this morning. Some may not have made any sense to you. Not a single bit. Or maybe it made every bit of kind of sense to you. But what I'm asking you this morning is to really think about it. Where do you place your faith? Where do you put your stance at? Do you put your stance on being a Christian or following Jesus?